Hello there, you're welcome to Village Square Africa. I am Keminni Amanor. Quick question for you. How many Christmases have you had in your lifetime? I know you're counting, but it could be one 31st Christmas this year, or maybe your 60th Christmas this year. But have you ever wondered when Christmas was introduced to Africa? How about before Christmas was introduced to Africa? What were our ancestors doing? Those are some of the questions that we hope to answer today on the program, and that's more than enough reason for you to stay with us here on Village Square Africa. Don't go away. Christmas. If you're like us, you've always been curious about how this holiday is celebrated in different parts of Africa, from the savannas of the Serengeti to the bustling cities of Lagos and Cairo. Africa is home to a rich tapestry of cultures and traditions, and Christmas is no exception. A special festive season for Christians as they mark the birth of Christ. Although the actual birth of Yeshua is contested, the day has come to stay as Christmas has traveled from Europe to the Americas to Africa and many other parts of the world. Or did it? Because there are those who believe the commemorative event may have begun among 3rd century AD Egyptians. Confusion is an acceptable state of mind regarding this, and I can assure you it makes two of us. In fact, Christmas is known by a variety of names in different local languages in Africa, like Keresimesi in Yoruba, Christmasi in Swahili, Ukristu Unodade in Zulu, Gena in Ethiopia, and Bronya or Blonya in Ghana. And each of these names reflects the unique cultural traditions and practices that shape the way that Christmas is celebrated in different parts of the continent. That's why we're excited to bring you an in-depth look at the unique ways that Christmas is celebrated in different parts of Africa, from traditional foods and customs to the ways that local cultural and religious traditions influence the holiday. We'll be learning all about what makes Christmas in Africa so special. We'll also be exploring the evolution of Christmas in Africa over time and how the holiday has been shaped by our cultural and historical influences. My name is Keminni Amanor, and you're welcome to the square. Joining us at this special gathering are Macharia Munene. He's a professor of international relations at the United States International University, Africa. He's joining us from Kenya. We also will have later on in the discussion Kweku Darko Ankrah, who is a historian and researcher, also a PhD candidate at the Institute of African Studies, University of Ghana. Kweku is not here with us yet, but Prof, you're here with us. Thank you so much, Macharia, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. Now, let's talk about Kenya and when the earliest records of Christmas or the commemoration of the birth of Christ were recorded in that part of the continent and how it came about.
Well, the celebration of Christmas as we see it today is evidence of the success of colonialism, because the version of Christmas that people have in Africa, in Kenya in particular, is really derived from the missionary activities. And once people are converted and made to believe that it's what the right thing to do, then it became part of the tradition. In fact, one of the terminologies used in Kiswahili is sikukuu, meaning the great day or big day. And that's a time for celebration, for having good time, for actually not going to work, because that's what it has come to mean. But it is essentially evidence of the success of colonialism in Africa through the missionaries. Today, it's taken as if it is normal, but the background to it, hardly anyone thinks about it. It is also for religious, spiritual purposes, people to go to the various churches or places of worship and commemorate the birth of Jesus, the supposed birth. But it is, we all know that he was not born on the 25th of December. That one is very clear. But it is symbolic. And the reason it is symbolic, it is a Roman concoction in the sense that as Christianity gained momentum and gained acceptance in the Roman Empire, then it incorporated some of the Roman behavior that could be also traced back to the past.
Very well. Now, Prof, I just want to ask you what you think about the school of thought that believes that the commemorative event of the birth of Christ is something that began here on the continent among first century Egyptians, first century AD Egyptians. What are your thoughts about that thinking?
But there's nothing wrong with that kind of thinking. One of the things we notice, not just with religion, but with a lot of contentious issues, is the agreement as to where it might have started or not started. 12th century of the Christian calendar era is kind of late because there have been some of that attempt to marry Rome with Jesus. And they're coming from the fact that the 25th of December is the time that the sun supposedly returns back to the north. It's been going downwards up to the equator, it gets to the equator, then it has to go back to the north. So it symbolizes a rebirth. And that rebirth, then you combine the two ceremonies, it takes that. Now, as to exactly when the whole ceremony started, is hard to say. But the notion itself of marrying the two was quite there, a little older than what you are suggesting.
Very well, Prof, I'm going to have you speak up for me because sometimes I'm unable to hear you. Now I want us to talk about the evolution of the celebration. How has it changed over time?
Well, it's in some places it has lost its European cultural bearing, and it is incorporated quite a lot of different African cultural activities. In Kenya, for instance, Christmas is a time of celebration, not just about the birth of Jesus, but time to enjoy life together. Eat, slaughter some goats or some animals for ceremony, dress very well, go and see people you have not seen for a long time. And it is that different in that it's a time of people coming together because they have not been together for a long time and eating together, celebrating, more than simply going to the church and say they are remembering the birth of Jesus. It is a time for ceremonies and good time as people relax from work. And it's holiday time. So even the people who are not very religious, they enjoy it because it's time to be free from work.
Very well. What are some of the events that characterize an African Christmas that, makes it different from a European or American Christmas?
Well, for one, you don't see too many those trees being decorated with some funny glittering things. You don't find that in African homes, except for the super elite who have copied the Europeans in a lot of ways. For the others, the meaning is quite different. Yes, there is the element of the birth of Jesus, but there is really a time for enjoyment and remembering things that you might have forgotten. It's a time for people not only to get together, but to reflect on what the past year has been and what they are likely to do in the coming year. Some of them might reflect seriously about their spirituality and whether they want to reinforce it and become better Christians than they have been. And that meaning the term itself Christian is also contested, because exactly what does it mean? There are people who tell you that to be a Christian is to appear in church and singing at the top of your voice, which is one thing. And when you leave the church, you go and do some other things. Others say, no, it's not just that. It is actually believing in the essence of Jesus of Nazareth, as opposed to what has been claimed about him. and the essence being that he was a decent man, he was a teacher.
Very well. Now,
there are those things that people have.
Prof, I'll have you hold your thoughts for me. Kweku Darko Ankrah has joined our conversation. Kweku is a historian and researcher. He's also a PhD candidate at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. He's joining us from Accra, Ghana. Kweku, thank you so much for coming back onto the gathering today. But we've been talking about Kenya and, how it got there. Prof says it is a sign of the success of colonialism. How did Christmas end up in Ghana? I suppose by the same means, but talk to us about it.
So Ghana, the Christmas came first to the Gold Coast, or what is now called Ghana, by the Portuguese. So the Portuguese arrived here in 1471. When they came first, they were explorers. By 1472, they returned with the European missionaries. And the European missionaries that came started the evangelization process in the Gold Coast. And as a result, Christmas, which they celebrated, became part of the culture, particularly at the town that they landed, which is Elmina, where the famous castle is. So by 1482, they have already built the Elmina Castle, and they have their station, and they were also having a church in Elmina for most of the people in the communities. So Christmas then became something that the Portuguese consciously ensured that the Gold Coasters or the Ghanaians will learn from that European celebration. So what they did was that back in Elmina, they will send their goods, the Christmas gift, and send it into the sea. And then they will allow the town folks to swim. And when you swim and you are the first to reach where they have kept the European goods, it becomes your prize. So in Ghana, across board, Christmas is known as Bronya, from the local word, which means bro, to swim, and nya, to get. So in Ghana, we call it Bronya, that is swimming to get a ceremony. So during that time, back in the day, it was all about celebration of people going near the sea and people who know how to swim engaging in that.
It will seem to also give meaning to why, in many African homes, this period is when you get a lot of presents from your parents. You get a lot of presents from family members, and there's a lot of joy making. Talk to us about some of the activities that characterize a Ghanaian Christmas.
So when you talk about Ghana, right from the swimming aspect, what also came into Ghanaian society is the use of children will use the palm frond to build a house they called a Christmas house. And during this period, the young children and their friends, and sometimes even people with old age will go into this palm frond house with designs and what have you. And they go and rest there within that period. And that period is where the children are given all the freedom and opportunities. Gifts that are sent to them, they send it into these palm frond houses, and they enjoy from the exclusivity of their parents. So that's what happened. And then learning from the gift-making aspect, people within the community, this is also the period that they prepare the best of sumptuous food, the period that they also send gifts to their loved ones, the period that people even pay visits to people in asylum, local asylums, people who are in need in the community. They find opportunities to do some sort of kindness, show them some kindness to feel good around that time. So in Ghana, that is what we see. Prior to the modernization that came from Europe, where people go to restaurants, places. Back in the day in Ghana, even when I was growing up, it was all about doing good for your neighbor, bringing people together, talking about social problems, talking about family problems, resolving conflicts, and so on, to bring some sort of harmony into society.
Very well. So gentlemen, I want us to talk about the pre-Christmas era. And Prof, I'll start with you. What were our ancestors doing before Christmas, as we know it now, was introduced to us?
Well, there were a number of ceremonies to mark special events. in the people's calendar, whether that one is after the initiation ceremony, when the young become adults, and once they become adults, then there has to be a major ceremony about that. In the harvest time, you had ceremonies to deal with it. So it all boiled to what the special occasion was. And when there was that special occasion, at least once a year, people would be gathering and they would be celebrating together. They'll be dancing together. They'll be praising. They'll be doing whatever it is. So it was a special occasion. They would turn to
was there any kind of
ways of worship.
Was there any kind of occasion to mark the end of the year, for instance, among Kenyans before the colonizers came?
Well, there was no, depending on the particular community that one, because there are so many communities, and each of them would have a different special event that would mark what may be said to be the end of the year at that particular time. So you cannot say that there was commonality in when the year ended or did not or began. So it depends on the region, but each of them would have special occasions, sometimes related to the movement of the sun, sometimes concerned with the rains, whether the harvest is good. When the harvest is good, then you have big celebrations, that sort of thing. And in each occasion, there will be an appeal to the deity, the God that they look up to, whether it's in the Mount Kenya people region facing Mount Kenya and say, well, that's where God lives. But then you got some other people and they will point to the sea or to the Great Lakes and connect it with the deity and then attribute all the good things to that particular connection. So there would be that spiritual angle, and it would be accompanied by good celebration about the good things they've had and the blessings that their God would have given them.
Right. Very well, Kweku, how about in Ghana? What were the Ghanaian ancestors doing pre-Christmas history to usher them into the new year, to recognize oneness at the end of the calendar at the time?
Yeah, okay. So this goes to the Akan calendrical and other Ghanaian calendrical festivals. So for the Akans who are the majority in Ghana, they do have what is called the Adedianu, which is the 42-day calendar, which combines to give the year, which is quite a little bit longer than the Gregorian calendar that the Europeans brought. And at the end of this calendrical year, it's the Adaikasi festival, which is the time that all the people, we call it an auspicious day. During this period, people don't go anywhere. They stay in the house. Their deities or the deities of their ancestors, the chiefs who have their stool that they sit on, because among the Akan, the stool is the power of the chief. All these stools of the former chiefs that have died, the ancestral stools this is the period they bring it out, they wash it, and then propitiate their ancestors and ask them for forgiveness.
Now, I want us to talk about, you did mention that there are different ethnic groups and how they mark the end of the year. But as far as you're concerned, what are some of the traditions from the past that have seeped into the way that Christmas is celebrated in modern days that makes it uniquely African?
Well, for one, each community tries.
No, Kweku, hold on. That's for Prof. I'll come back to you.
Ensure that it does not lose touch with its past. And in fact, we may point out that, particularly in Kenya, we have various denominations that they call themselves independent. They have Christian attributes. They are still Christian, but not European Christian. That's what they call. They are not missionary type. So they have that recognition. And in so doing, they bring in some of the cultural elements that match them before the onslaught of the Europeans through the missionaries. So things like having ceremonies, feasting, slaughtering goats, because goats in some places have a very symbolic value as a sign of good times, celebration, enjoyment. And Christmas also tended to, the way it grew up, was kind of a relief, because in the colonial days when people are being forced to work in hard and plantations and that, the only time they would get time to go and be free or feel relaxed was during Christmas. So they took that as something to anticipate, not so much to be spiritual about it, but to go and enjoy the families. And all. So the independent churches have their own ways. And if you look at them, the way they are doing it is very different from the mainstream churches, from the Catholic Church or from the Anglican. But you can see there is something about it that they are very happy invoking the past, the ancestors, the gods of their parents.
Very well. Kweku, I'm coming back to you with the same question. What are some of the ancestral traditions of Ghana that have seeped into to define what Christmas looks like in Ghana?
So it is the return to the village, what we call the return to village moments, where people in the olden days, in their own end of year festivals, they move from all walks of life back into their community to propitiate their ancestors, to ensure peace and harmony. This is still very valid in the Ghanaian celebration. So as around this time going, if you go to the stations in Ghana, it will be very difficult to even get a car to your hometown, because everybody is rushing back home to do what they used to do back in the day during the celebration of Akosidai, which is the 24-day end of year calendar, which brings people from all the community. It is also the same period that interstate rivalry, as well as ensuring peace between them, they organize some sort of, back in the day, some wrestling fights, back in the day, some sort of dancing competitions and what have you, or they pull some tag and so on. Currently, all these things are going on in the communities. If you go to most Ghanaian communities, people are engaging in canoe racing or canoe regatta and so on. So at Christmas, you go to Elmina, you will find this thing going on. So these things have not changed. It is some of the things the communities used to do back in the day that are still very relevant within the celebration. Again, the use of Prof was talking about the African independence churches, which in Ghana even started quite earlier, where people use some of these ancestral instruments and what have you in their church celebrations. It is still going on. You see elderly women singing in the old Ghanaian languages, talking about things of the past, about people who have come to pass in the community, singing it in the churches. So it will give you an idea of people in the community who used to be part of the churches that you are also now part of. So you see that the African ideas are still relevant, except that in the cities you see the modern celebration, but in the villages, the way Africans used to celebrate back in the day, in the pre-colonial times, are still embedded in the celebration in the Ghanaian society.
Very well. We're going to take a quick break from our conversation, but when we return, we will talk about music, food, and dance. We will also ask the question, if Christmas celebration is a sign of success of colonialism, should Africans continue to mark this day? And we'll also talk about the evolution or the involvement of tree lighting traditions in Africa, whether or not it's an African thing or it's also something that was brought in by Europe. Stay with us here on Village Square Africa. We'll be right back.
News Central TV, Africa's #1 storyteller, has come with the best of both worlds. With a combination of news app and live TV, we ensure that you keep track of the latest headlines, breaking news, and in-depth analysis from professional journalists from around the continent. Download the News Central TV app on Android and iOS and get started today. Don't forget to follow us on News Central's social media platforms. News Central, Africa First.
Today on the program, we have been discussing the origins of Christmas, how we ended up with Christmas here on the continent. We've talked about the unique African traditions that have defined what an African Christmas should be like or looks like now. We've talked about pre-colonial, pre-Christmas history as well. But right now, I want us to continue our conversation about what an African Christmas looks like when it comes to music, dance, and food. And Prof, I'm coming to you with that. Food plays a really important role for an African Christmas, just as music does, just as dance does. What happens in Kenya as far as the traditions are concerned?
Well, Kenyans are fond of good food, especially slaughtering of goats and having things like mokimo, the ugali, the various foods that people eat on a daily basis. And then they will do it with good abundance and enjoyment. They enjoy their drinks, and in the process of enjoying the drinks, some traditional drinks, others may be bought in the big shops. But there is sometimes a habit of trying to remember the ancestors, libation. So as people take their drinks, they remember to let a little bit of it go to the floor.
Even the Christians?
To see that the ancestors are not forgotten, that they can have their blessings there. So there are those things that happen.
Very well, Prof, I'm asking, does the libation pouring include the Christians?
Hello?
I'm asking, do the Christians also pour libation to the ancestors?
We have not seen them put them on the ground, on the ground. I know they drink in the church with the nice-looking goblets, but when in these occasions when people are merry and enjoying themselves, and they remember, hey, the ancestors may be complaining, so you make sure that you actually do put something there for them to drink, and then you can have your good. So it's part of that tradition that has developed.
Okay.
And,
but is there any special food that comes along with Christmas in Kenya?
Well, the traditional food become very, very common. The roast meat, the nyama choma phenomenon in Kenya has become widespread. That the people who have meat to sell are very happy at that time because they make a lot of money.
Prof, are you looking forward to this meal? Because it seems the mention of it got you giggling.
Because the meat goes together with ugali and mukimo and some other things that people would say, yeah, now once they have had that, they say they have eaten. Until they've eaten those things, they don't think they have eaten anything.
All right, so just hold your horses for me. I'll move on to Kweku now. Kweku, is there any special food in Ghana to mark Christmas? I remember when I was also growing up in Ghana, we waited and ate our long grain rice during Christmas. But talk to us about the food traditions, the music traditions, and the dance traditions of Christmas in Ghana.
Okay, so in Ghana, before the jollof and jollof rice and other rices came on board, the traditional food that has been marked for Christmas was fufu with some groundnut soup or palm nut soup or light soup, depending upon the favorite of the people. And then also during that period, you were asking Prof about the pouring of libation. You know, the African society, we cannot do this without also forgetting our past. And all of us come from a traditional houses. So when we go back home, while though we are celebrating Christmas, which is of Judeo-Christian origin, what other people also seek to do during that period is the pouring of libation to their ancestors. So irrespective of your belief as a Christian, when you go back home to your family house, the family head will definitely pour libation and mention the name of your ancestors in charge of you to take care of you. So it is something that no matter how Christian you are, when these things are going on, you participate, you can walk away.
And Kweku, I want to ask, it would seem that modernization will have curtailed our abilities to go back home. and do some of these traditions irrespective of the religion you belong to. How does that affect us as a people, Kweku? Well, I'll move on from
Africans. Second, we are Christians. And all these two personalities come into fore during festive occasions like Christmas. So while traditionally we had the African society that celebrates end of year celebration, and Christmas is also pegged at the same time. So it's sort of double celebration of a sort. So we don't only go to celebrate Christmas, but it's also a period where before Christmas came, our ancestors were already propitiating the ancestors and deities. So during this period, when we go back to our ancestors, our family also take the opportunity to propitiate the ancestors, as well as asking them for forgiveness and also helping us to have a good year that is to come.
Very well,
that is why our personality is like that.
Very well, Kweku. Hold your next thoughts for me. Prof, I was asking Kweku about what the implications could be if we continue to allow modernization and, as he puts it, the special circumstances of today stop us from reconnecting with our ancestors by going back home and, pouring doing traditions like pouring libation. What could be the implications for modern day Africans?
Well, there's nothing wrong with combining. Actually, what's needed is to remove the Europeanness of modern Christianity and let the hybrid, because culture is progressive, it is not static. And what we have now in Africa, we cannot say that the way of the Europeans are going to disappear completely, but it can be organized such that you blend. And actually, that's what has been the issue. From the time of independence, you have various theologians, African theologians, saying, no, we reduce the Europeanness and remain with the essence of Christianity. And the essence of Christianity is to bring in the African cultural aspect so that the Africans feel that they are part of it. And that has been going on for the last 60 years or so in the way of blending so that Africans feel. In fact, it's said that the largest growing population of Christianity in the world is in Africa. Mm-hmm. And the reason that is happening is because the Africans do not see Christianity as this foreign imposition that it was in colonial times.
Very well.
And the way we used to say that there is no difference between a preacher and a Mzungu, that does not apply anymore because people have been able to adjust and be part of the evolution. And so the Christianity in Africa today, to a large extent, has a lot of blending with African culture that is not to be found in Europe.
Very well. Kweku, I know that in Takoradi in Ghana, masquerading and dancing is a really important aspect of the holidays. Talk to us about how this began and what role it plays in Ghana's Christmas.
Well, like Prof said, as one Kenyan professor said, John S. Mbiti says, the African is notoriously religious. We were very religious before the Europeans came. So migrating into Christianity was something Africans were doing already because they know God. Every African society have name for God. Now, within the celebrations, how it became part of, like the Takoradi masquerade or what we call it, Ankrah in Takoradi. It is also known as Carnival. And these Akan people or the people from the Fantiland who celebrate the Carnival or the fancy dress and send it to the Caribbeans. A man called John Kweku, who was also taken from Takoradi during the celebrations, was sent to Bahamas and then to Trinidad and Tobago. So he started that Mardi Gras Carnival thing in the Caribbean you see today. So in Bahamas and then Trinidad and Tobago, they call it John Canoe, a sort of a festival, which is the carnival that have become very global today. How it became part of the celebration in Takoradi was that it is part of the local Kundum festival, which is celebrated around that time. And during that period, a carnival is organized where people stand on stilts, they wear best of the local hunter dress, The local hunter dress goes with tree leaves that they wear. And the modern times, they have come with a cloth. That is a pieces of cloth in a shape like leaf. That is what you see them in the anchors in Ankrah as a celebration.
I see.
That has become part of a Christmas celebration in Ghana today, because the seamen in Ankrah, they are trying to commercialize it. And now there are a lot of groups. So there are various shipping canoe groups that come together and organize that carnival specifically for Christmas celebration, which was something they used to do back in the day on the quiet, but now they've tried to commercialize it.
Okay, so Prof, I'll give you the last word on this one because it's time for us to go, unfortunately. If Christmas is a success of colonialism, should Africans continue to celebrate it as it is?
Yes, Christmas is evidence of colonial success in terms of inculcating European values and behavior on the African people. And it's been accepted. But can it be stopped? I don't think it should be, because it has been turned into a hybrid activity. Once you bring in all the other characteristics of it, and there are so many people who claim to be Christians of the European variety, and yet they're African, it had to expunge it. But what can be looked at is how to hybridize and ensure that the African angle does not disappear. It's also worth noting that the beginning of Christianity, soon after Jesus
Very well.
It was the Africans who are holding it.
Very well, gentlemen. I'm afraid we'll have to end our conversation here. But to you, Prof, I say Christmasi in Jema. And to you, Kweku, I say Afishiapa. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here on Village Square Africa. Now, wherever you're watching us from, whether you're in Nigeria, where you'd say Eku Odunkere Simesi, or in Swahili, Christmasi in Jema. Afi, if you're in Ghana, Feliz Navidad or Feliz Natal for our Portuguese and Spanish viewers. And to you, our French viewers, Joyeux Noel. Thank you so much for your company today. I wish you a very Merry Christmas. My name is Keminni Amanor. Bye-bye.